Thousands of mourners turn out for the funerals of 3 Palestinians, and President Abbas accuses Israel of provoking chaos. And the United States is sending a missile defense system to Guam amid rising tension with North Korea. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news, and here are the details. A royal decree appointed Dr. Adil Twaisi, chairman of the Board of Trustees of Mu'ta University, as recommended by the Prime Minister. Another decree also appointed Dr. Rida Al-Khawalde as president of Mu'ta University upon the recommendation of the Higher Education Council. Mu'ta University, near the southern city of Karak, was the scene of scuffles among students that broke out on campus after elections for a new student union. The riots had forced authorities to suspend classes. A statement said today that classes will resume on Sunday. The Economic and Social Council has released its first report, which Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour said would help policymakers and legislators. The report, compiled in cooperation with the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation and the Spanish Economic and Social Council, deals with serious economic and social issues. Mansour said during a ceremony to launch the report that the Council had held a series of meetings covering 30 topics directly affecting citizens' lives. He said the tough economic conditions required a collective effort to come up with solutions and policies to streamline the economy. The Prime Minister also said the Treasury was hit hard by a cut in Egyptian gas supplies to the kingdom. The government, he said, had adopted a new energy strategy with a focus on renewable energy, storage of oil and gas, as well as gas exploration and exploitation of oil shale reserves. He said the economy was also affected by the Syrian crisis, as the kingdom hosts about 500,000 Syrian refugees. The Prime Minister said estimates had put the cost of services to the refugees over the past 2 years at 590,000 million dinars. The flow of more refugees, he said, would increase those burdens. Head of the Economic and Social Council, Jawad Anani, said the report is of great help to decision makers as it provides a detailed outline of national priorities that need to be addressed. He said it will also provide valuable data to researchers, academics and analysts. Deputizing for His Majesty the King, Chief of the Royal Court Faiz Al-Tarawne led a ceremony of the Entrepreneurs Award for the year 2012. Tarawne awarded Akram Khreis, the founder and owner of International Beverage Consultancy Company, which was established in 2006 with only 10 employees. The company has become one of the main providers in the industry, working successfully on over 200 projects worldwide. The Young Entrepreneurs Award or Entrepreneurship Award was given to Muhammad Shakir, founder of Arabia Weather website, to be the first to provide Jordan and the Arab world with the weather forecast and other meteorological services. A number of national and international economists, businessmen and media figures attended the ceremony. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas blamed Israel for rising tensions in the occupied West Bank. Israeli troops shot and killed 2 young protesters in clashes at an Israeli checkpoint near Tulkarem in the northern West Bank. Zain Abu Sufa has more details.
Tension rises to new levels in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Thousands of Palestinian mourners turned out for the funerals of 3 Palestinians. 2 of them were teenagers killed by Israeli troops in some of the worst violence in the occupied West Bank in years. The upsurge in unrest was triggered on Tuesday by the death of Maysar Abu Hamdiya, a 64-year-old prisoner serving a life term in an Israeli jail and suffering from cancer. Palestinian officials accused Israel of delaying treatment of Abu Hamdiya and gave him full military honors at a funeral in Hebron, where gunmen fired into the air as his body arrived at a mosque in the divided West Bank city. Palestinian youths pelted Israeli forces with stones after the funeral was over. Israeli soldiers responded with tear gas, stun grenades, and plastic-coated bullets.
We should move forward and complain about the occupation to the International Criminal Court. It is unacceptable that our people will die one after the other in the jails, and our lands are being confiscated day after day in front of us until we lose our lands and are kicked out of this country.
In the city of Ramallah, Palestinians held a symbolic funeral and chanted support for all Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. Further north, hundreds of Palestinian mourners marched through Anaqta as they attended a funeral procession for the 2 teenagers who were killed last night. Israeli troops fired on youths who threw firebombs after dark at a guard post near Tulkarem. In Gaza, the Interior Ministry of Hamas held another symbolic military funeral for Abu Hamdiya. International rights groups have repeatedly criticized the treatment of Palestinian prisoners and called for better conditions. Israel says it is using normal procedures, but the Israeli Physicians for Human Rights organization thinks otherwise.
Abu Hamdiya's death raises serious issues and concern about ignoring prisoners' complaints and about medical neglect. We know, according to a lawyer that visited him, that in August 2012 he was already complaining about pains in his throat, and only in February 2013 he was diagnosed as having cancer throat cancer. Sorry. The doctors of the IPS are, first of all, needs to be loyal to their patients first and foremost as doctors, but we see that they are more loyal to their to the security system, which employs them, and to its needs. This brings up many cases in which the treatment is not the proper treatment and is not being done according to what's needed.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said Israel's use of lethal force showed it wanted to provoke chaos in the Palestinian territories.
With these actions, we say that Israel wants to finish the security situation in the West Bank. If it cares about relations, it will never use its power to kill the protesters.
The spike in violence comes days before U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is scheduled to visit Jerusalem and Ramallah in hope of reviving peace negotiations that broke down in 2010. Zainab Soufa for the News at 10.
Jordan's northern border has witnessed an upsurge in the number of Syrians crossing into the kingdom in the past weeks to flee the conflict in their country. The Armed Forces border guards said they received about 2,000 refugees who crossed during the past 24 hours from several entry points along the frontier. It said many of the new arrivals were women, children and old people, and 10 wounded men were also among them. The Armed Forces Command said over 11,800 refugees had entered since last weekend till this morning. Military guards evacuated them, offered the injured necessary medical aid and transferred them to military and public hospitals in the country's north. The rest received urgent humanitarian assistance before being transported to refugee camps in the Mafraq area. The International Red Cross said the humanitarian situation in Syria is worsening rapidly. It said some areas are a landscape of devastation and destruction after the bloodiest month in the 2-year conflict. The Syrian government's restrictions on aid convoys have meant most supplies are distributed in government-held areas. The president of the ICRC said aid workers had been able to make more trips into opposition-held areas in the past 2 weeks.
If we would have more diligent procedures in order to bring aid wherever aid is needed in the country, as both sides would accept the neutrality, impartiality and independence of ICRC's activity, we would be able to do much more than we do at the present moment. So I'm talking rather of a principled space than a physical space.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says he's deeply concerned about rising tensions on the Korean peninsula. He voiced hope North Korea would soon lift restrictions on South Korean workers at the Kaesong Industrial Park. North Korea has said it approached what it called a merciless attack against the United States, potentially involving a nuclear strike. Laith Shanqiti has the details.
North Korea repeated its threat to launch a nuclear attack on the United States. The United States said it would send a missile defense system to Guam, and the U.S. military adjust to what Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel called a real and clear danger from Pyongyang.
They have nuclear capacity now. They have missile delivery capacity now. And so as they have ratcheted up their bellicose, dangerous rhetoric and some of the actions they've taken over the last few weeks present a real and clear danger and threat to the interests, certainly, of our allies, starting with South Korea and Japan, and also the threats that the North Koreans have leveled directly at the United States.
Hours later, South Korea said North Korea had moved what appeared to be a mid-range Musudan missile to its east. It was not clear if the North planned to fire the rocket or was just putting it on display as a show of force. North Korea has also barred entry to a joint industrial complex it shares with the South for a second day and said it would shut the zone if Seoul continued to insult it. South Korea's defense ministry said a missile launch from North Korea was always a possibility and they were ready to respond in such an event.
Our weapons are ready. Regarding North Korea's statement today, our military readiness is already high. We are able to manage any possible crisis.
Japan also warned North Korea against further provocations, saying they were not in the isolated nation's interest.
Our government doesn't believe we should be pushed around and swayed by every provocative statement out of North Korea. We are coordinating with the relevant nations to enact the various Security Council resolutions. We also strongly urge North Korea to understand that these provocative statements are not in the interest of their nation.
Russia, on the other hand, said Pyongyang's rejection of a UN Security Council resolution which signaled it would pursue its goal of becoming a fully pledged nuclear weapons power was categorically unacceptable and meant prospects for resuming international disarmament talks were shut off.
This radically complicates, if it doesn't in practice shut off, the prospect for resuming six-party talks to resolve the nuclear issue on the Korean peninsula.
The United States currently has about 30,000 troops in South Korea to support the country's 640,000 forces. But despite the threats, there are no signs on the ground that North Korea is preparing its military for war. Experts say North Korea is years away from being able to hit the United States with a nuclear weapon, despite having worked for decades to achieve nuclear arms capability. Laith Shanqiti for the News at 10.
Gunfire from a helicopter operated by NATO forces killed 4 Afghan police officers in the eastern province of Ghazni. Civilian casualties are a source of friction between President Hamid Karzai and his international allies. A deadlier attack took place in western Afghanistan yesterday when more than 50 people were killed in a courtroom. Militants strapped with explosives stormed the governor's compound in the capital of Farah province, bordering Iran, where the trial was taking place. The Taliban said all 10 of its fighters who were on trial were freed. Farah province, where the US and Italian troops are stationed, saw a sharp deterioration in security last year, with increased targeting of government officials and a regrouping of insurgent networks. Cleanup efforts are underway in the Argentinian city of La Plata. Authorities continued search and rescue operations after a devastating rainstorm ravaged the region. At least 49 people were killed after flash floods swarmed the city, while 20 people are believed to be missing. Over 1,000 residents were forced to evacuate their homes due to flooding. The National Security Secretary said the government was working closely with local officials to ensure residents received all the necessary support to cope in the aftermath of the natural disaster. One of the 3 diagnosed patients with H7N9 bird flu in East China still remains in danger. According to the doctors, the patient has the habit of visiting bird market, which may be the reason of his getting infection. No epidemiological link has been found among the 3 of the province. The virus has little effects on human upper respiratory tract, but will lead to calcification of the lungs. The pathological changes can develop very fast, with patients' condition worsening fast. China's health authorities require areas affected by the new strain of bird flu to prepare daily updates on the local epidemic situation. So far, China has confirmed 11 H7N9 cases. And in Japan, a 5-year-old white tiger and a 7-year-old white tigress gave birth to 4 healthy baby cubs. The cubs were born in Tubu Zoo, northwest of Tokyo. The extremely rare species has a population of only 100 to 200 worldwide. Still too young to be separated from their mother, the zoo tentatively plans to introduce the 4 babies to the public around May the 2nd. At present, the white felines have yet to be named. The zoo will accept name suggestions from the public and do an official naming ceremony at the end of May.
Consecutive wins. 4.3 to shoot.
In Australia, the 2018 Gold Coast Commonwealth Games logo has been unveiled at a ceremony exactly 5 years to the day from the start of the Games. The logo features a swimmer, a hurdler and a gymnast amongst the Gold Coast skyline and the ocean, as well as the green of the hinterland. World and Olympic, the 100-meter hurdle champion Sally Pearson was at the unveiling. Now the weather. The country will remain under the effect of a relatively cold front, so it will be partly cloudy to cloudy with thundery showers in northern Jordan. Winds will be gusty and blowing dust in southern and eastern parts of the kingdom. Tomorrow will be a relatively cold and cloudy day with scattered showers and gusty winds blowing dust in the Badiad Desert region. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a partly cloudy day tomorrow with moderate winds picking up at times and calm seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility in southern and eastern desert areas due to dust. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Now, to close, here's a reminder of our top stories. The Prime Minister says the first Economic and Social Council report will help decision makers and the National Development Strategy. Thousands of mourners take out for the funerals of 3 Palestinians, and President Abbas accuses Israel of provoking chaos. And the United States is sending a missile defense system to Guam amid rising tension with North Korea. Now with that, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I am Rad Laptouche. Thank you for watching and have a good night.